about politics, relationships.
The Securities and Exchange Commission sued Coinbase, the largest cryptocurrency trading platform in the United States today. The SEC accuses Coinbase of breaking market rules by allowing users to trade unregistered securities. This comes a day after the SEC accused the crypto platform Binance of mishandling funds. Well, President Joe Biden is awarding $115 million to support needed investments to rebuild Jackson, Mississippi's water infrastructure. The federal dollars are part of $600 million in appropriations funding approved by Congress last year. Jackson, a majority Black city of nearly 150,000 residents, is in a state of rebuilding after its water system nearly collapsed last summer due to major flooding and years of infrastructure neglect. A Texas sheriff's office has recommended that a San Antonio area district attorney filed criminal charges following an investigation into the transportation in the fall of 49 asylum seekers from Texas to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, allegedly on direction from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, it's not clear whom the charges would be filed against, but the case would include both felony and misdemeanor charges of unlawful restraint, according to the sheriff's office. State officials in Oklahoma approved the local Roman Catholic archdiocese request to operate a public charter school. It will be the first explicitly religious public school in the United States in modern times. Supporters of the school hope to use it as a test case to take to the Supreme Court and win a clear right for charter schools to offer religious instruction. Well, the 2024 GOP field is ballooning this week, adding 3 new candidates. Chris Christie and Doug Burgum are set to announce their presidential campaigns this week, and Mike Pence has already filed his paperwork. As Chris Christie enters the race, he has cast himself as the one candidate unafraid to give voice to the frustrations of Republicans who have watched Donald Trump transform the party and those who say they have had enough, either of the ideological direction or the years of compounding electoral losses. 3 women who claim Cuba Gooding Jr. sexually abused them, including one upset that she never got her day in court when Gooding resolved criminal charges without trial or jail, were prepared today to testify at a federal civil trial to support a woman's claim that the actor raped her in 2013. Now, the case settled just before the trial was slated to begin. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, a Trump ally, is calling on the Justice Department to provide lawmakers with internal documents laying out the scope of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents found last year at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Well, America's state capitals are as polarized as ever, with lawmakers imposing unflinchingly conservative or liberal agendas this year, even in politically diverse places. The 2022 election brought single-party control of the governor's office and legislature to 39 states, the most in the last 3 decades. You are listening to Areva Martin in Real Time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. And in this hour, I'm joined by Dr. Niambi Carter. She's an author and professor at the University of Maryland, and Dr. Omikango Dabinga. He's also a professor at American University. He has a new book coming out. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show. And in my second hour, we go behind the headlines. My expert legal panel is here to discuss the upcoming motions for a new trial and motion to set aside the verdict in the federal bribery trial of Mark Ridley Thomas. Will former LA Council member Mark Ridley Thomas become the exception to the rule that's pretty entrenched that federal guilty verdicts are oftentimes, and some would say even impossible, to overturn? We'll go deep on what's happening in the Mark Ridley Thomas federal bribery trial in hour 2. But before I bring on my guest, here's what I'm thinking about in real time. As you probably have heard throughout the last 24 to 48 hours, calls are growing quite loudly, I would say, for the arrest of a woman accused of shooting her neighbor Friday in a small town in Florida. This woman, who has been identified as a 50-year-old white woman, shot and killed A.J. Owens, a 35-year-old mother of four. Miss Owens' children were playing in a field near an apartment complex where the shooter lived. The shooter began yelling at her kids to get off the land. She's also used racial slurs when addressing the children. And apparently, at some point, she threw an object. Now, there's some dispute whether it was a skate or an iPad that the kids had left behind. But apparently, this object did strike one of the children. As children do, they went home, they told their mom, and Miss Owens, their mother, went to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door, apparently to talk to this neighbor about confronting her children, throwing the object, and using racial slurs, including the N-word. But before the neighbor could even open the door, she shot and she killed this young mother of four. And the saddest part of this story is the mother's 9-year-old child was standing with her at that door and apparently witnessed his mother being shot and killed. Now, the sheriff in this county says that Florida's 2005 Stand Your Ground law prevents him from making an arrest. If you will recall, this law came to light in the 2012 prosecution of George Zimmerman for the shooting and killing of Trayvon Martin. Florida's Stand Your Ground law allows people to meet force with force if they believe they are in danger of being seriously harmed by an assailant. Now, under the law, a person can use deadly force if they reasonably believe that his or her life and safety are in danger as a result of an overt act or a perceived threat committed by someone else. So here's the problem with the Stand Your Ground law in Florida and the law that exists similar to Florida's law in about 24 states across this country. It's this concept of reasonable belief. This standard is so subjective. Now, in this Florida case, this shooter can assert that she was in fear, that Miss Owens was going to break into her apartment and that Miss Owens was going to do some bodily harm to her. Now, even if Miss Owens did nothing but appear at the door unarmed and knocked on the door with the intent to talk to the neighbor in a calm and professional manner, this law allows the shooter to claim that she was in fear of an overt act or a perceived threat that would be committed by Miss Owens. Experts have done research on Stand Your Ground's law, and studies show that the immunity that it affords can produce racially disparate results. Racial stereotypes can cause people to misinterpret innocent behavior as something threatening or violent. And Stand Your Ground laws can then provide justification for shooting and killing someone, as in the case of Miss Owens. We already know that Black people are considered to be inherently dangerous just by virtue of being, not by virtue of doing anything in particular. And this case is so troubling. Here's this mom whose children now will be without her. This mom who was doing what any mom would do, which was making an effort to protect her children, and she ends up dead. The shooter didn't even have the decency, didn't give her the courtesy, the civility of trying to mediate this dispute, didn't call the police, didn't retreat. And according to Florida law, she really didn't have a legal obligation to do so. We know there have been efforts to repeal the Stand Your Ground law in Florida and in other states, and Florida has been adamantly opposed and resistant to any changes to its laws. The National Rifle Association has weighed in. It has been a staunch supporter of Stand Your Ground laws, as well as other conservative lawmakers. I am hoping against all hope that this tragedy, this tragic shooting and killing of this mother of four will be the catalyst, will be the stimulus for Florida or some state to be a profile in courage and to step up and to say enough is enough. This kind of senseless violence should not happen in our states and in our country. My heart goes out to Miss Owens' four children, to her family, her mother, her sisters, her friends, all of whom who have been speaking out, demanding that justice be served. We're going to watch this case very closely, and hopefully there will soon be an arrest of that shooter who fired through a closed door without even asking a single question. Stay with us. More of today's trending news and my expert analysis when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for Black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of Black audiences are concerned about the lack of Black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the Black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% Black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black. Your Black. Your Black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4, only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
We are back, and I'm joined in this hour by Dr. Nyambi Carter. She's a professor at the University of Maryland, and Dr. Omikango Dabinga. He is a professional lecturer at American University, and he's out with a new book. The book is called Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. Welcome back, Dr. Carter and Dr. Dabinga. While we were in our commercial, there was some breaking news, and the news is that Florida has confirmed that it was Ron DeSantis who actually arranged for the flight to Sacramento of these immigrants. And it's, again, after days of silence, officials in Florida confirmed that the administration of Governor Ron DeSantis had orchestrated 2 recent charter flights that carried groups of migrants from New Mexico to Sacramento. These flights obviously resulted in an outcry from leaders in California who promised to initiate criminal and civil investigations and possible charges. On Twitter, California's Governor Gavin Newsom suggested that kidnapping charges were warranted against those responsible for the flights. Dr. Debinga, how surprised are you that the evidence now is coming out that these flights from New Mexico to Sacramento, California were orchestrated by Ron DeSantis?
I'm not surprised. What frustrates me, however, is that the Department of Justice is not engaging in this at a faster rate. When we watch what's happening with some of these other trials relating to election denial with Donald Trump, we see like states are leading the charge, like Fani Willis in Georgia and so on and so forth. But the Department of Justice has more information, has more resources. This is the same with Ron DeSantis. He's kidnapping these people after they get processed and sending them all across the country and has been doing this for months. So where is the Department of Justice that has more resources and more knowledge on how these things are supposed to be processed and dealt with? And because Ron DeSantis is clearly not going to stop. And the majority of these cities that he's been sending to people to, the majority of these cities are cities with black mayors on top of that. So it's not the case for all of them, clearly, but there is something very intentional about what Ron DeSantis is doing. And really, at the end of the day, this is one of the reasons why DeSantis could be more dangerous than Trump, because Trump is all about the bombast and it doesn't care about the law. Ron DeSantis is very precise about how he goes against traditional norms. He's very precise about how he changes legislation. I mean, he got Florida to agree the legislators to agree to let him stay governor if he loses the election for president. The man is slick and he's doing stuff behind the scenes. You don't even know about it until it hits you in the face. So if people don't stop him now, he's never going to stop. And the Department of Justice needs to get ahead of this more than other states.
Yeah, I think absolutely correct. I agree with you, and it's a great point. Let me read to you, Dr. Carter, what the communications director for the Florida Division of Emergency Management said. She said that the migrants' relocation to California had been voluntary and that they had been taken to a nonprofit. Through verbal and written consent, these volunteers indicated they wanted to go to California. A contractor was present and ensured they made it safely to a third-party NGO. The specific NGO, Catholic Charities, is used and funded by the federal government. Now, at a press conference that DeSantis was at, not related to this issue, he was at a bill signing ceremony. The governor did not take questions from reporters. And they found, Dr. Carter, this silence from DeSantis on this high-profile incident that's drawing national attention to be uncharacteristic, especially given how pointed Governor Newsom and others have been in their attacks of DeSantis. Now, are we to buy this story that these individuals voluntarily agreed or indicated that they wanted to come to California, and it was so important to DeSantis that he put them on a private jet to send them? I mean, literally, he didn't put them on a bus. He didn't put them on a Greyhound or the Amtrak. They flew private jets to Sacramento. What are we to make of this story?
Well, look, I mean, I think the thing that we're seeing now is that there are real questions about the legality of all this. This is why you have attorney generals in California and in Texas, right, in San Antonio, more particularly, looking into this, because these people were giving inducements, right, to also say, yes, they weren't big ones, right, but a $10 gift card to McDonald's when you have nothing looks like a lot. And it's not clear that people knew what they were signing. It's not clear that these documents were translated. And then they were also giving people these pamphlets telling them that they could qualify for services that they knew full well they wouldn't qualify for as non-citizens. So I think there's a lot happening here. There is the trickery, right? People are being told things that are not true, that they're going to be jobs, they're going to be places for them to live. People are given unfair inducements that would make, to you and I, we would say $10, that's nothing. But to someone who has nothing, that's a lot of something. And then, then it's also this question of, can you use Florida's money to pay jets to play people from Texas to then transport them to yet another state? And they've been doing this to Massachusetts, to California, and to New York. So quite frankly, I think there are a lot of questions. I mean, I think the fact that Floridians seem to be okay, at least with their governor spending at least $1.5 million, and I think he has a coffer up to $12 million of their dollars to spend to resolve this issue for other states is a big question.
That's such a great point, Dr. Carter. These people weren't even in Florida.
No.
These people are being transported from New Mexico to Sacramento. And you're right, $12 million have been set aside in the state of Florida for the transportation of these migrants. And it's clear, as you said, the inducement. So what's voluntary? We got to get into a whole definition of what voluntary is. If I'm homeless, if I have no job, if I'm new to this country, I don't speak the language, and you come and tell me there are jobs in this other state and there's services and there's housing and there are resources, and I sign, yes, I voluntarily signed, but I was fraudulently induced to sign. These people were outside of a shelter. So it wasn't like they went knocking on the door of someone in Florida saying, hey, can you get us a jet over to Sacramento? Like, can you help us get to Sac? So it just makes you so angry how vulnerable people are being used as pawns to elevate the street cred, the conservative street cred of this governor. And you are right, Dr. Domingo. We need to see the Department of Justice step in. There's a class action suit being filed by those migrants that were, flown to Martha's Vineyard. Now California is looking at whether it's going to file some kind of civil and criminal case against, the folks behind this, i.e. DeSantis and company. But we need national action on this. We need the Department of Justice to step in to send a loud message to DeSantis, to Abbott, and any of these governors that think that they can use people, the most vulnerable people, at their lowest point to try to score points for their presidential campaigns. It's really just immoral. DeSantis is coming to Sacramento apparently on June 19th for a big fundraiser. I hope there are so many protesters waiting at the airport when he lands that he's got to get back on that plane and turn his little butt back around and go back to Florida. I hope California sends him a very strong message that his kind of politics and his kind of antics are not wanted in the state of California and that he's not welcome here. This is really, it's just upsetting when you think about it. Dr. Carter, let's talk about Cuba Gooding Jr. I didn't even read the headlines on Bill Cosby because I could have read the headlines on him. 86-year-old woman has been given the go-ahead in a civil case against Bill Cosby as well. There's a 1-year look-back period. So this woman says that Bill Cosby raped her. This happened in, I believe, 1969 or so. That lawsuit is able to move forward. I assume she's been emboldened by E. Jean Carroll's successful lawsuit against Donald Trump. Cuba Gooding Jr., as of this morning, his team said he wasn't going to settle. He was holding firm. He wanted his day in court. And then an hour later, I step away from my computer. I get a notice he has settled yet another lawsuit. There are apparently up to 30 women who claim Cuba Gooding Jr. sexually abused them. And this court, this federal trial, had it moved forward, the judge was going to let 3 other women testify about similar experiences with Mr. Gooding.
Well, look, I think Cuba Gooding and his legal team probably figured that it's better to settle this now than have all of these accusations be put into the legal record, right? Because that's going to live forever. And yes, people can do interviews and people can kind of talk about these things, but it's a different ball game when these women have to stand up on that stand and detail the many ways that he assaulted them, the many ways that emotionally and otherwise from their experiences with him. And if, he plans to continue to have a career, I don't know what that career looks like. I think he thought it better for people to think that I'm a sexual abuser than to actually be found guilty of it, even in a civil trial. It's not criminal, but still, I think this was a bit of gamesmanship on his part. Because, of course, people say, I'm not going to settle, I'm not guilty. But when you really think about what the longer term consequences this might be, even if he had gotten out of there, found not to be liable, this is still on the public record. This is still fodder for people to report the details of this. I think Cuba Gooding thought it better, along with his legal representatives, to settle than to have that be out in public.
What do you make Dr. Dominga? Bill Cosby, he just had a $500,000 civil verdict judgment against him in a civil court outside of LA. That happened last year. Now this other woman is claiming that Bill Cosby raped her, and she's seeking civil judgment as well. Some folks say, these cases are so old, they're decades old, the ones related to Bill Cosby. Why are they allowed to come forward? And, I said to someone this morning on a news show, you can't fault the women. If the legislature opens up a window for them to file claims, then they are allowed to file their claims. Bill Cosby, Cuba Gooding Jr., anyone defendant in a lawsuit gets an opportunity to have their day in court. But Bill Cosby's almost 90 and he's still being sued for his conduct decades ago.
Well, the real shame of this is that we have this system in place that makes it harder for victims to come forward. The way that they can lose their careers, the way that they can, the way that they can lose opportunities to move themselves forward. And then you have the financial disparities if they don't have the resources of somebody like a Bill Cosby or a Trump. And so really at the end of the day, when you hear Agent Carroll talk about the time period, they coming from that same time period of what was expected of women today, you don't talk about these things. She talked about people should look at it as an honor to be flirted with, even if things went a little bit further. Then you throw in all of these other things with Quaaludes and the drinks and so on and so forth. There was never an incentive structure in place for victims, especially women, to be able to come forward. And so I applaud women who are in their 70s, their 80s, who are seeing the opportunities now to get up there and speak up, because they've always known it was the right thing to do, but society was shutting them down before they could even seek legal action. But now, post Me Too, a lot of people thought that Me Too was just a moment, but it really has been a movement as it relates to how it inspired people to keep doing this. And so whether it's Cuba Gooding Jr., who's much younger than Cosby or Trump or anyone in between, I am happy that women in particular have an opportunity to get justice, and any assault victim.
Absolutely. When we come forward, we're going to talk about the Roman Catholic Church running a public school, and Mississippi is finally getting some relief with respect to its water. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my House shot with a rest by, shot with a rest by, shot with a rest by.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Get off the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation.
I'm joined by Dr. Niambi Carter. She's a professor at the University of Maryland, and Dr. Omikongo Dabinga. He's a lecturer at American University. He's also the author of a new book that's coming out a couple of weeks, and it's called Lies About Black People: How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. All right, both of you are educators. What are you making of a Catholic archdiocese being given the go-ahead, the legal go-ahead, the green light to take over a public charter school? What does this mean for a separation of state and church and keeping public schools free of religious influence? What concerns do you have about this a local Catholic church taking over a public school? This is happening in Oklahoma. State officials are approving it, and they see this as a test case to take to the Supreme Court as they try to blur the lines between, public institutions and religious instruction. Dr. Carter, what are you making of this?
Look, I think this is like you said, this is the test case, because I don't think this was going to stop with this one. And I think what we already know is what many people know is it takes a while for these cases to make their way to the Supreme Court. So while they're duking it out, these people are still allowed to teach this religious curriculum to the children whose parents have selected that school for them to go, and taxpayers will have to foot that bill. Or in this case, it's fully funded, not even partially funded, because they do have schools like this that are religious, but get some funding from the state, but their funding they get elsewhere. But this is the first time we see fully publicly funded religious institutions. And so I think what we're going to see here is other Christian, in particular, religious institutions that will start doing these kinds of things. I think what will be interesting if other religious denominations like Muslims or Islam decide they want to do the same with Islamic charter schools, will they receive the same reception? Because part of this is, if you're going to open the door, you have to open it for everybody. But I think this is a really dangerous precedent. I mean, even the Attorney General in the state of Oklahoma said, don't do this. And yet the state of Oklahoma is proceeding because they have a gentle listening ear with the Supreme.
What's the harm
right now?
What's the harm, Dr. Dominguez? Some people would say, oh, what does it matter if kids say a prayer in the morning, or there's a plaque hanging on the wall with the 10 Commandments, or, some praying hands, or a picture of Jesus? Help us understand why this is a big deal.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if we are talking about the separation of church and state, then we need to have the separation of church and state. And as Dr. Carter said, it really comes down to whose religion. I mean, what if there's somebody who doesn't worship Jesus? Are we also going to start letting Muslim students leave to pray if it's during the time of 5 times a day when they're supposed to pray? When we have this movement going on across the country where people are talking about parents' rights and, respect for parents' abilities to have a say in their classroom, they're not talking about all parents. They're talking about the Christian fundamentalists who are trying to recreate what's basically happening in the Taliban in Afghanistan. So that's the real danger. People are saying that our values matter and yours do not. And if you don't want to come to our schools, then don't come. And this is going to happen all across. It is happening all across the country. And people are emboldened by the fact that we have that Supreme Court that is an activist-minded Supreme Court. They're emboldened by people like Vice President Mike Pence, who's about to run for president, and other ones who want to make this a fundamentally Christian nation. And so really, at the end of the day, these people have no interest in religious tolerance for other groups. They want to make sure that this country is indoctrinated in a Christian value, in the Christian extreme that they see it, this evangelical style. We're not talking about Dr. King style Christianity. We're talking about this evangelical white supremacist style Christianity, and they're going to use every legal means to do it. They're going to use every religious means to do it, and ultimately, because they feel like they have been emboldened by the Supreme Court, they're not going to stop, which is why I'm going to say that I hope that if Biden does indeed win a second term, he expands the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned white supremacy, because underneath a lot of what we know in terms of this white Christian movement is buttressed by a white supremacist narrative, and a narrative of, a white hierarchical structure that puts certain folks, typically white cisgender males, at the top of that structure, and basically requires everyone to fall in line with their views and their ideology. And anyone that doesn't is othered and marginalized. And that is what's so scary about a Catholic church taking over a public school. And I happen to be Catholic. And so I went to a Catholic school. I went to a Catholic elementary school, a Catholic high school. One of my daughters went to a Catholic high school. So I believe in a Catholic education, but I believe that as a parent, it should be limited to those Catholic schools, and those of us that choose to send our kids there, that's what we should do. My kids also went to public school, and I didn't want my kids, when they were at public schools, being indoctrinated with Catholicism. That was appropriate when they were at the Catholic school and we were making a choice. But we know Black and brown kids who go to public schools in their communities aren't going to have choices. A lot of them won't be able to leave those schools. They won't be able to make choices to leave, and yet they may be forced to be indoctrinated with this white cisgender patriarchal narrative that is so incredibly harmful. We've seen it at work. We've seen it at work during the 2016 presidential campaign. It'd be interesting to see, Dr. Carter, the role that white evangelicals play in this election coming up. They've been a little quiet Some have stepped away quietly from Donald Trump, but it will be interesting to see if they rear their ugly heads, if they become galvanized around him in the way that we saw in 2015. This new report out that says that our state capitals are as polarized as they have been in decades, and lawmakers on both sides of the agenda, both sides of the aisle, both conservative and liberal, using their power, their single party control, to push through legislation consistent with their ideology, and the will of the voters be damned. Where are we going to be, in 10 years in this country if this continues to be the pattern that we follow?
Well, listen, I think if there's going to be much of a country left, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but if you keep attacking the very institutions that undergird your country, like your democracy, like fundamental constitutional freedoms, like freedom of religion, to be free from religion, right? That's what the Establishment Clause is about. We don't establish a state religion, yet you see other actors, state actors, trying to do just that, like we were talking about with Oklahoma. So I think, these evangelicals are watching this very closely, and I don't think they're quiet at all. They're playing a long game, right? I mean, they are the ones who are behind these sort of abortion bans, and they're the ones who are pushing through and sort of, quietly waiting to see what's going to happen, because they're right on board. I mean, this white Christian nationalism is very real. And I think they have sold Americans that it's harmless. It's just about family values. And yeah, there's ideology and there are things that you believe in. But your religion if your religion is your ideology, then we're in another world of hurt, because that is expressly what the United States was founded to get away from. Right. So I think these people have perverted their sort of values and norms and beliefs into a political, turn it into public policy. And that's something you didn't see with Republicans even, 50 years ago. I mean, the party has strayed. And of course, everybody uses their power to push their vision of the world forward, for sure. But I think one of the things we have to always keep in mind is that when you have one party in power that can do whatever it wants, it's really just setting up a sort of tit for tat kind of thing. So they don't stay in power forever, but we know that they can consolidate power and stay in power very long. And that's dangerous for whatever political party or political leaning you have. So I think that's what we're going to see in these state legislatures. People redrawing districts that favor themselves, people changing the rules of the game, doing lots of commissions, abolishing certain agencies. All kinds of things can go wrong. That's why we don't want single party systems. That's why they're dangerous. But if people are not respecting the rules of the game, then it's all for naught, and everybody is just really egging on a team. They're not really pushing forward policy and putting forward politics that actually empower and make our lives better. Everybody just wants to win, and that's a very different game.
Yeah, and a part of that is totally ignoring the will of the people that elected them and put them in power. We see even on this issue of access to abortion, the way many of these conservative legislators are voting is inconsistent with what their own constituents want and feel about access to abortion. So it's, if they go to the state houses, and some go to Congress and Senate, and they detach from the very people who they've been elected to represent. When we come forward, I want to talk about $115 million in support to rebuild Jackson, Mississippi's water infrastructure. Is that enough, given the harm that has been done to the residents, 150,000 Black residents and others in the city of Jackson, Mississippi? Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Good off the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your ear. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
So, Dr. Dopinga, President Joe Biden is awarding $115 million to Jackson, Mississippi to support its investment in rebuilding its water infrastructure. I actually had an aunt that was living in Jackson and was running a restaurant. And I remember her telling me that she had to literally boil water in order to serve at her restaurant and to cook at her restaurant. And it became so onerous that she eventually closed the restaurant because it was just too difficult trying to serve food in a hygienic way, in a safe way, given the state of the water infrastructure. And now you see the federal government getting involved and granting some what appears to be sizable dollars to this city that is predominantly African American. But the question is it enough? And, is it too little, too late? Really, I guess is the better question.
Well, I don't know about the too little, too late, because, they were supposed to receive about $429 million from the EPA a few months ago, but that was going to be for the state. And so now I believe that with Chris and Clark, as well, that maybe the Biden administration has realized that they have to be more specific and direct and intentional with getting money directly to Jackson, because the state has a history of denying Jackson resources primarily because of its Black leadership and Black majority there. And so I feel like the Biden administration is being, obviously we wish it happened earlier, but the reason why they have a water crisis there is not because of of Jackson's Black leadership. It's because of what the state and what the leadership in the state of Mississippi has done to undermine Black empowerment in that city. We can talk in other segments about what they're doing with the court systems and the police systems and the like, and the water crisis is just part of it. So I applaud what Biden is doing as it relates to specifically targeting Jackson, because the state of Mississippi has specifically targeted Jackson, and they need this federal assistance to make sure that they can start having their own level of sufficiency. And I'm going to just come back to saying again, the Justice Department needs to be looking into what the state of Mississippi has been doing to the residents of Jackson as well.
You say that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. The reality is the Justice Department is needed in so many places and spaces from these police departments. Yesterday I talked about Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson, New Jersey is out of control. It's a history of abuse, of shooting and killing Black men. I read this story that just literally made me sick at the stomach. The level of corruption in that police department that has gone unchecked for decades. The state's attorney general stepped in and took over the police department, an effort that I don't necessarily support, because we know that Republican states attorneys are trying to take over police departments in cities run by Black folks. So you can't support it in one instance, but oppose it in another. But again, that's where the Justice Department, and under Donald Trump, the Justice Department was basically serving as his private law firm and spending a lot of time trying to keep him out of legal jeopardy rather than investigating some of these practices, whether it's the infrastructure issues that you just identified, Dr. Domingo, or these rogue police departments. Obviously, the Biden Department of Justice, I'm not thrilled about Merrick Garland as the Attorney General, but Kristen Clark and some of the other folks that are in that Civil Rights Division are outstanding and are doing a phenomenal job. And I hope in the second Biden administration, we see a much stronger Attorney General that will, go after some of these issues that we've been talking about today. This is a great segue into the GOP candidates, Dr. Carter. That field on the GOP side is getting awful crowded. Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. It's a long list of folks all vying to knock Donald Trump off his number one position. And Chris Christie says, look, I'm the tough New Jersey former governor that can get this done. I can give a voice to the frustration of Republicans who are upset with Donald Trump, who've watched him transform our party, who's watched him lead our party to all of these electoral losses. Is Chris Christie just, selling, as we used to say back in the day, wolf tickets? Or do you think there's some real, can he really bring some heat to Donald Trump?
Well, look, I certainly think Chris Christie does have a reputation, right, from his time in New Jersey. I mean, he talks a big talk. He's a big guy, and he says what he thinks. I mean, literally and figuratively, right? He says what he thinks. I think keeping Donald Trump from being the nominee would be a win. But this crowd is it's crowded. This field is crowded. I mean, you also forgot Vivek Ramaswamy, who's still, I think, in the race. So there's yet another person, right? And what he did the first time around was play the middle. He just had to make it through the primary. And I think that's the part that many people forget. It's not the general that's going to matter. It's what happens in the primary. So Chris Christie has to have that money. He has to have that backing, and he has to be able to stick it out through the full primary cycle. And I think a lot of these names you listed, these people aren't going to make it. They're not even going to make a splash. I mean, Tim Scott is a non-starter. Nikki Haley, a non-starter.
Well, I think they're interviewing for vice president, I think, more
I think
than
you're exactly right. But that's the thing. I think Chris Christie certainly does not want to be vice president. And he certainly would never be number two to a Donald Trump. And he has been vocal in his criticism of Donald Trump. I mean, he did like everybody else did. They lined up behind their man in 2016, but I think people see the destruction of their party, and it's so far right, that to pull it back from the brink, I think would take a Herculean effort. And maybe this will energize Republican leaners and moderate Republicans who felt really beleaguered by the party, who've left, who just are disinterested. Maybe he can do that. And I think he might have enough gravitas if he can stay in the race, right?
Yeah. Big if, you're right, big if, because these races, you want to raise $1 billion, basically, plus $1 billion plus to run for president of the United States. And Chris Christie didn't do so well in 2016. In fact, he did pretty poorly. Dr. Domingo, the majority of Republicans say they don't want Chris Christie. They're like, dude, you know what? You can phone this in. You can stay home. We ain't feeling you. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, can he play a role? I'm with Dr. Carter. He's not likely to go far, but can he be that voice that punches on Trump in a way that these folks who want to be vice president aren't going to do? So if you're Nikki Haley, you're Tim Scott, you're not going after the boss because you want a second, you want to be number 2 on that ticket. Maybe you want a cabinet position. You want something from him. But if you're Chris Christie, you ain't getting nothing. You already and tore that relationship up. It's over. It's done. So you can just, go for it. Do you think he can dirty Trump up in a way that will help us in the general election?
I don't think so. And the reason why is because Chris Christie's going to say what he's going to say. He's going to come at Trump, but the Trump supporters are not going to be listening to him, right? And I don't think that, Chris Christie may say it on like an MSNBC or CNN, but they're not going to interview him on like Fox or One America, where Trump supporters are going to be. And so is he going to be pretty much talking into a vacuum? And lastly, I fully believe that Christie could really hit Trump hard on the debate stage, but I don't believe Trump's going to attend the debates because he doesn't need to, because he's already the front runner. So I don't think he's going to give Christie that space to be able to publicly attack him or embarrass him. And so that's why I feel like ultimately Chris Christie's going to be a lot of bluster, and maybe in some of the networks that are non-Republican leaning or non-heavy Republican leaning. But I think ultimately he's going to be yelling in the wind.
Yeah, I hear you on that, and you're right. If he goes on Fox and tries to attack Donald Trump, they're cutting his mic, and he will never be invited back. So we know he's not going to be spewing, any kind of hate against Donald Trump, or let's put it like this, telling the truth about Donald Trump on Fox. But I'm hopeful that he gets a big enough platform on those networks you just identified, CNN, MSNBC, maybe some of the morning shows that happen on network television on Sundays, some of the print media, gives him a platform because maybe he impacts those independent voters, not those hardcore Trump voters. He's not going to make it through the primary. We're all in agreement about that. But maybe he dirties Trump up enough so that when if he's the guy coming out of the primary, going into the general, he has had an impact on those independent voters who still are trying to decide if they should vote for Donald Trump. So maybe Chris Christie does have a role to play. All right, guys, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Niambi Carter. I want to make sure I give a shout out to you as well as an author. You have a book. It's called American While Black, African Americans, Immigration, and the Limits of Citizenship. Make sure you take a look and pick up a copy of Dr. Carter's book. And Dr. Dubinga, again, he has his new book coming out called Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. Thanks so much to both of you for your brilliant insights and expert analysis. Look forward to seeing you the next time. All right. In my second hour, we go behind the headlines and my legal experts help break down what's happening in the federal bribery trial of Mark Ridley Thomas. Does he have a shot at having his guilty verdict set aside and perhaps getting a new federal trial when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580?
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search. We are